my theory on racing was I'm just going to put it on the line. I would go, you know what, I'm going to race as hard as I can, because I always felt like you never know, like if you don't sort of have a crack. And I always thought, what's the worst that's going to happen to me? I might blow up and end up walking into the finish line. And it was amazing. For so many races, I would race as hard as I could from the start, and I'd finish and go, oh my God, I didn't actually blow up. And then I think you build confidence by that. And I always just kept saying to myself, you never know when it's going to be your day. And I think I don't see the point in sort of holding back and going, oh, we'll just sort of see how it goes. Like, I think if you back yourself in, you've done the training, then you got to put it on the line.
Hello, beautiful people. On today's podcast, we have the lovely Nikki Wynd. Nikki is a highly respected runner in the ultramarathon community. Starting her running journey in 2005, after the birth of her son, it wasn't until 2008 when Nikki did the 100-kilometer Oxfam Trail Walker that really began to lean into this new area of her life. By 2011, Nikki was awarded the Australian Female Ultra Runner of the Year, having broken the course records of 6 out of the 7 races that she completed in that year. It's safe to say Nikki has ran a lot in her time, with some of the most notable achievements being her completing Badwater, referred to by many as the world's toughest foot race 3 times, including being the female winner, first Australian female winner, and record holder of the over 40 category in 2015. And in 2016, she set an Australian record running 343 kilometres in 48 hours in the Australian 48-hour track championships. Nikki currently runs between 180 kilometres to 200 kilometres per week. What I personally love about this conversation is how Nikki has this beautiful balance between the importance of dedication and commitment, particularly when it comes to training, but also this touch of gentleness and enjoyment that she emphasizes is just as significant. You would assume that a woman that has achieved so much, including winning the female category of a world's toughest foot race, would be made up of just grit and grind. But she shares the importance of drawing on positive energy, of placing intention behind a smile, and of being motivated by family. It is in this conversation that we get to know Nikki at a deeper level, about how she is all about giving something a crack, putting it all on the line, and giving her 100%. If you are enjoying these podcasts, please rate, review, subscribe. Doing this truly helps with this podcast and the incredible stories behind this podcast reach more amazing people just like you. Share with friends and family, become part of the To Be Human collective, and I am certain your performance mindset will be up-leveled after you listen in to this conversation with the phenomenal Nikki Wynd. Welcome to the To Be Human podcast, Nikki.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here.
So lovely to see you, Nikki. So Nikki, I wanted to start with something that I saw you write on Instagram. And you said, who would have thought the girl who used to get her mum to write a note to get her out of cross country back in high school has an Australian record for running 48 hours. So I love this, Nikki, because I think, particularly when it comes to high performers and ultramarathon running, I think a lot of us can assume that you've always been a runner since you're very young. And I love the truth in what you shared here. So to start off, I'd love to know, or for you to share the beginning of your journey, sort of that transition period between moving from someone that obviously wasn't really inclined to be a runner to then start moving into the space of high performance ultramarathon running.
Yeah, it's actually a really interesting journey because growing up, I came from a pretty sporty household. Like my dad always went to the gym, and I did play competitive tennis and basketball at like a pretty high level, but I actually never ran. And it really probably started when my son, who's now 17 and a half, was born. And, I started just, I sort of had this thing in my head because I'd always worked full time. I was like, as soon as I've got maternity leave and I've got the time I'm going to exercise and run and walk. And I just sort of, started with him in the pusher really. And then he would sleep, and it became this thing, well, I'm just going to keep running and walking while he's sleeping. So, some days I'd be out 4 or 5 hours, and, it was quite funny because I would have people in the local area go, oh my God, like I saw you 3 hours ago. And so from that, I just found like I just loved the running. I loved the freedom of it, and it probably suited me because I could just put on a pair of runners and go. So I didn't have to rely on someone else. I didn't have to go to the gym, and and I loved it over summer. And then sort of from there, I did go to the gym and had some friends, and we, they just said to me, would you be keen to do Oxfam? And I was like, oh my God, what's Oxfam? And it was a 100K charity walk, and it appealed to me, the charity side of it, but also going, oh, that sounds pretty cool, like 100Ks. Oh my God, like these people actually run that far. And just sort of from there, that was 2008. So that was the first time I did it. And we did it in like a sort of respectable time of 15 hours. And that was probably the real introduction to longer races. And I think before then, like I hadn't even really done a marathon or done anything. So I sort of went straight to 100K. And then a couple of years later, similar team were like, hey, let's do Oxfam again. And that's probably for me 2010 when the running journey really kicked off, and we started doing some ultra races. And from that, I just thought, like, this is just cool. It was a really great environment. I met so many, awesome people who I'm still friends with today. And and most of those races were out in the bush. So it was just that, being out in the bush, just, I loved the run walk aspect of it. And it was just such a fun experience for me.
And what do you think the difference was between your first Oxfam trail walker and your second? Like, what do you think ignited you more the second time round to sort of start really moving into the space of ultra running?
Well, I think the first one, like I was so naive, like I knew nothing about running. So I go back then, I don't feel like, obviously now it's massive, like ultra running is so huge now. Whereas back then, you didn't have the resources, I didn't even know about trail shoes. So I think I did my first my trail run in like just a pair of, road shoes. And then come 2 years later, I think the sport was just starting to grow, when even just by going out to some little local events, met some, sort of for me, they were like, oh my God, these guys have been running for 5 or 6 years, like really good ultra runners. And I think the ultra running community is just so supportive. So I just got to know people who were, I was like, oh my God, these guys are, do this every weekend, and, picked their brains, and, just sort of, I got a running coach, and I just sort of thought, you know what, like if I really put some time and effort, and I'm someone who, if I do something, I want to do it to the best I can and put 100% in. So I just sort of felt, you know what, like we had a really strong team. Let's just give it everything and see what we can achieve from this.
And I found it really fascinating because you obviously sent me your CV before we spoke, and of all the things that you've done and achieved. And your 2011, because you sort of speak about moving into this space a bit more seriously in 2010. 2011 was just absolutely outrageous. It sort of looked like almost anything that you participated in, you got a course record on, which is just like truly, I'm looking down, it was like course record, like I think 5 or 6 events that year. I'm so curious, like how do you become such a high performer so quickly? Do you think it like there's a little bit of like natural genetics that comes into play in this, or was it truly like, as you're saying, it's like you went full in and really wanted to be the best that you could be?
It's funny because I go, like even today I still look back and go, oh my God, I can't believe some of the things I've done, because I would never ever, and even my girlfriends, like, like laugh to some degree, like, oh my God, like you did that and did, run this. And I really think, yes, I grew up in a sporting family, but I didn't run. But I just think I was so committed and so dedicated, and, I trained hard. I put 100% into it because, like I said, I go, if I do something, I want to do it properly. And I think also when it's new, like I look back and I go, I don't know how I did it. Like I almost race sometimes every weekend. And I think too, one of the benefits was I was fresh. Like I hadn't had 10 years of running behind me. I was so like enthusiastic and, and like, I think too, just like having a training program, and I had structure and routine, and, and I think too, I was just really committed to trying to do the best I could. And I think some of my results surprised me, and I would go, like probably the first race I won, I was like, oh my God, like that's obviously a fluke. Like, there's probably no one running, so I didn't really think I was that sort of good at it even to start with.
And so throughout that, when did you sort of move from the headspace to obviously sort of like it's an introduction, you're doing it with friends in the Oxfam, and then you're sort of doing it on your own? Did you get to the point where, like, sort of as you share, right, it's like the first race that you win, it's surprising, you feel like maybe there weren't a lot of competitors. Is there a switch where you're like, okay, I'm doing this to sort of be the best I can be, to now like, oh, I actually am in the space where I can start competing against other people in this?
Yeah, look, I think, like I always go, like probably even still now, I go, I know I'm not like up there, I always go into a race, and maybe now as I'm older, I go like maybe top 3 in my age group. But even back then, my theory on racing was I'm just going to put on the line. I would like go, I'm going to race as hard as I can. Because I always felt like you never know, like if you don't sort of have a crack. And I always thought, what's the worst that's going to happen to me? I might blow up and end up walking into the finish line. And it was amazing. For so many races, I would race as hard as I could from the start, and I'd finish and go, oh my God, I didn't actually blow up. And then I think you build confidence by that. And I always just kept saying to myself, you never know when it's going to be your day. And I think I don't see the point in sort of holding back and going, oh, we'll just sort of see how it goes. Like I think if you back yourself in, you've done the training, then you got to put it on the line. And, like in all honesty, out of all my races, probably a couple I haven't had great results, but that's out of probably hundreds of races.
I love that headspace, because it's certainly different to what mine has been moving into the ultra space. I've sort of started out as someone that was very like self-exploration, and it was like ultramarathon running, as I'm sure you've experienced, is you learn so much about yourself. But I feel like it's really courageous to have that headspace to go into it and think, what am I capable of? And let's like leave it all out there. Yeah. Because I feel like there is a fear, within myself certainly, and I think within others that I've sort of met that sort of do running in a similar space to like me, is there's a slight fear there that you are kind of afraid of, like, what am I capable of? And really like sort of giving that extra little push, because I think a lot of us can sort of, particularly in the endurance and sort of long distance, it's like you leave a lot in the tank because you've got so far to go, and it's very hard to gauge sort of, as you're saying, like how do you sort of lean in and put enough in that you're not going to sort of blow up. What is your gauge with sort of the long, particularly at the start, in coming into it and being new to it? How did you sort of gauge that fine line between giving all you've got but still being able to get to the end and finish?
As well, like it's quite funny because I also do a lot of reading on, the human body and performance. And I remember once reading a book saying that no one's ever pushed themselves, well, don't take this literally, but that they've actually died. Like they've ran so hard and pushed them so hard that they get to the finish line and drop dead. So the body naturally will, slow it down. You might end up walking a bit more. And like, I think too, like I always gauge myself, like I'll go out hard, but I think your body starts telling you, and whether that's okay, I might need to take a few little walk breaks. If you're really in tune with your body too, I know for me, I might be, I'm starting to feel a bit flat. Okay, get more food, get more drinking, a little bit of a walk. And I think it's also amazing how quickly the body responds to that. And the more you race, the more you put yourself in those situations, that the more I might have a bit of a flat patch, but you can come out of it and actually feel so much stronger. And I think it's just believing in yourself. If you've done the training, and just know that you will come through those flat, bad patches, and you might have sore legs, but things do come good. And it's surprising, like at 50 Ks, your legs might feel really heavy. 150 Ks in, you feel amazing. So I think it's just a process and just believing in yourself. And yeah, the more you race, the more you go through those stages.
Yeah, I love that you shared that. I did the 100-kilometer run out in the Blue Mountains this year, and I truly experienced that. I think around like the 75-kilometer mark, I was like, my body was wrecked. I was so cold. I was so tired. Like I could have given it up then, but obviously I didn't. But when I crossed the line, like I felt great. Like I sprinted with this other person, and it was like,
yeah,
I love those experiences, as you're talking about, Nikki, that truly show you that it's the distance running is really about those ebbs and flows, and it's about knowing what to do in both the ebbs and flows, and understand that you may be experiencing a lot of pain in one moment, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's going to follow you through to the end. And it's just being prepared to know what to do in those situations.
Yeah, I agree. And, even little things like myself, I find if I come into a checkpoint, smile. Like, and I go, if you're smiling, seem really good, and people will start going, oh, my God, you look amazing. And then you're like, oh, my God, yeah, like I do. I feel even drawing that energy. And I find, too, like a lot of races, like people go, you're always smiling. And I'm like, I've really tried to just be in the moment and appreciate being there. And that just, I think, really gives you a lot of good energy.
I absolutely agree with that. And I think that's so relevant. It brings me to wanting to speak to you about Badwater. And I'm really excited to speak to you about this, Nikki, because you've done it 3 times. And, obviously 2015 was such a remarkable achievement for you. But I'd love to start the year before that, when you went into Badwater for the first time. And I'd love for you to share sort of that experience of going into one of the toughest races in the world, being your first time.
I remember. So obviously to qualify for Badwater, you need to complete 300-mile races. So I'd done that in 2013. So I'd done those races, put my entry in, got in. And even then I felt like a bit of a fraud, going, oh, my God, here I am. Like I haven't really done a lot in the scheme of things, going off, to America to race the toughest race in the world. And before the race, they have a pre-race briefing and a check-in, and you go and you get your race number. And I remember walking into this venue, and I actually nearly started crying, and I felt like I was in a bad dream, and I was like, I just want this over. Like I shouldn't be here. And I was just thinking, what if I have a really bad race, like the cost to get here? And, and I knew, like, I felt like, I was there for Australia. And, it was just I just felt so stressed, and like, what am I even doing here? Like I shouldn't be here. And then I think once the race started, I remember to a friend of mine saying to me, just do what you do best, run a really, really long way. And I remember I kept thinking about that in my head, and I kept, thinking about the people back home. And once I got running, I think I just did what I do best. And I remember it was then such an amazing experience just to finish it. Sadly, it wasn't on the original Badwater course because there was restrictions that year. So it was a different course. So that was probably a little bit disappointing for me because I wasn't on the original, from lowest point to highest point. But I still got to experience it. And I think too, I came third that year, which for me just blew my mind. And I think that really set up for 2015 because I knew what to expect. I wasn't scared. Really, probably 2014, I went there just going, I just need to finish this. I don't want to make a fool of myself. I just want to finish it. So, but that was a really good stepping stone into 2015 for me.
And at that point in time, did you feel like that was genuinely the toughest race that you had ever done?
Oh, gee, it's really tough because, yes, it's hot, it's 50, 52 degrees. It's a different heat to here. It's hot, but it's such a dry heat. And you do have crew with you. So you've got your crew. You can't have someone run with you until about from the first day, 14, 15 hours in. So you're on your own. but you've got your crew stopping like every 5Ks and, so you're getting watered down, you're getting fed, you're getting, kept cool and everything. There's some pretty massive climbs and the heat. And so I think probably yes, but I don't think it was probably like what they're saying, people's shoes melt on the road. Like it wasn't anywhere near that bad.
Right.
Yeah.
You can cook an egg on the road. I think I've seen in one of the YouTube videos.
Yeah. So it's hot, but you're looked after pretty well.
Mm-hmm. So did anything significantly change in your mindset between your first and second time doing Badwater?
Yeah, so when I went there 2015, I'd applied, I'd got back in. So you find that in January and then the race is July. So I really just structured my whole, the first 6 months all around Badwater. And even I look back now and I look how I was like racing nearly every weekend, and I did, I think, 300K races in 5 weeks, and I did a 24. And, obviously I was just, like in the best shape of my life. And, I went there this time I didn't actually go there going like, I'm going to win this, because there was other runners there. And I sort of thought like, they're pretty, like they're world class. They're hard to beat. But I go, for me, I sort of thought, you know what, I looked at the 40 to 45 year course record for that age bracket. And I thought, you know what, that's what I'm going after. Because I thought, that's not about winning the race, but it's actually achievement, something I can sort of focus on. So, and I remember, it's quite funny because I think it was one of my girlfriends, we always have a drink, we always catch up for a champagne before any race I do, and it's just become tradition. And I remember saying to her as we're having our drink before I leave to go overseas, I'm actually like putting it all on the line. Like I go, this is it. I don't know when back. And I said, I'm going, I really want to have a crack at the 40 to 45 age group record. And she was like, okay, And I think too, it was just like a different mindset. Like I actually went there focused. I knew what to expect. Same. I just wanted to race hard. And it was like, if I blow up, I blow up, but I don't want to leave, like I just wanted to put everything into it and not come, like, I didn't want to come away and go, I wish I could have like pushed a bit harder or done better. So it was just a totally different mindset going into that race.
And what does putting it all on the line look like to you?
Well, it was, I suppose it's like you put your game face on and it's like, turn the music on, turn the music up. And it was just like head down. And I don't think I probably hardly stopped for 5 minutes during the whole race. And it was just head down, focused. Like my crew were amazing, and I was just so determined that. But it's funny because in saying that, when I look back, the race itself was so effortless, and I go, when you have a race where everything together, I didn't feel like there was any hurry, and I just felt like the race was just a process, and I never felt in this hurry that I've got to get to the end. And it was just like the whole race, it unfolded. And I just sort of went with it. And I think, I was feeling good. So my crew were amazing. They pushed me hard. And I think it was about 40 Ks to go, I actually took the lead. And I remember one of my crew going like, you've won Badwater. And even then I was like, I haven't. I said, don't say anything until we get to that finish line. Like I was still at that point going like, we just got to keep pushing. And it was just all surreal. It felt so effortless and so easy. And that's where I go, like looking back, I think I'd done the training, my head was in the right space, and it just, everything fell into place. And it was just like the perfect race, look back, it was pretty cool.
Yeah, sounds like a beautiful flow state. So I'm interested, and obviously only share as much as you're comfortable with, but what goes on in your mind? Like what are your thoughts? Do you have like mantras that you focus on when you sort of put your music in and your head down, or is it sort of just like it ebbs and flows? Like do you go in with an intentional focus when you do big races like this?
I remember that year, my son, he usually comes to most races with me, which is, one of the most amazing, like I think something I'm really lucky I think I'm lucky for that. I've traveled so many races overseas and he's been able to come. However, he didn't come the year I won. So he was there the year before and the year after, but didn't come to this race. And yeah, so I thought about him a lot, and it was funny because I was going, I couldn't, I was even thinking, I can't wait to finish just to ring him to go, oh my God, how the race went. And I thought about, family and friends back home, and my crew kept giving me updates, like, because obviously people were just posting out of control on Facebook and social media, and they just kept saying to me, just giving me feedback and comments from friends and family. And a lot of times for me, even having a pacer and a crew there, I just turn up my music and just get in the zone. But even though you're not talking, I know they know, when you've got the right crew behind you, they know how to push you. And one of my crew, he'd just say, right, we're running to the next white post. And I'd be like, no. And he goes, no, we're doing it. So them subtly pushing me. And then I think I felt like I had the whole of Australia cheering for me. And I think once I did get into the lead, it was just head down, let's just get this done. So that just, and I kept thinking, as soon as I get to the finish, I'm going to ring Dan and just go, oh my God, I've won Badwater. So that just kept motivating. But sadly, it was like about 3 a.m. So I couldn't ring him. Yeah.
And because I know that obviously family is so important to you, and I know that you've even shared on your social media, about, and I think a lot of ultra runners find this sort of that juggling between, looking after their children or their family, having to work and also putting long hours into training. I'm sure an experience like that when you do finish, is it kind of like reassurance to you that it is worth it? It is worth sort of the sacrifice within that?
100%. It and I have to be honest, like obviously, for me, I tried to do all my training. Like I'd be up at 5 a.m. I always felt, I've only got one son, but I always felt like I was always there for him. I didn't really miss too much of his sport. Like I always went to his sport. I'd factor my running in around his sport. But then obviously the amount you do train, you can't be home 24/7 along with work. And then I go, I sort of think to myself, like, he's been to China, he's been to Europe, he's been to America, he's been to so many amazing places, which I'm so thankful for because of the running. Because I would never have taken him to those places. And even now, like he's at an age that, he really appreciates it. We went to Spain, went to Barcelona a couple of years ago. So even now he's got such an appreciation of travel. And so, as much as I go, you always try to be there, sometimes you do feel guilty with the amount you're not at home, you're out running, and then there's work thrown in. And so it is pretty, like to win something like that, you go, the sacrifice is really, really worth it. And I remember Dan telling me, because I finally got to speak to him the next morning, and he was like, oh my God, like my teacher got up, and because it was like all over the, it was like over the news, and he goes, oh my God, like my teacher got up and read an article to the class, and he was all excited. So I thought that was really cute.
It's beautiful.
Yeah.
So moving into your third Badwater, I'm really intrigued. Like, what is the headspace and the intention between going back for a third time?
Yeah, it's interesting because when 2015, the last climb of Badwater is like 17K straight up to the Whitney portal. And I remember at that time, my husband was there walking with me, and I said to him, he's going, oh my God, like you've won Badwater. And I said, I'm never, ever running again. I said, like, what could top this? I said, there's nothing else I can do that's ever going to be better than this. And then obviously that changes. And it's funny because 2016, if I'm honest, I probably didn't really want to go back because like I felt like I'd done, I'd achieved so much the year before, and I had such a perfect race, and it's hard to have those races. And I just, I don't know if it was like my heart wasn't in it, but I just went back, and I probably went back thinking, like, out of respect, being the previous champion, I think it's out of respect to go back and race again. And when I look back, I probably my heart wasn't 100% in it, but I did want to sort of go back and run. And I go, you're probably never going to have the same 2 races in a row. So, yeah.
And did that sort of feed into any sort of added doubt in that 3rd race? Because obviously, like, when we do such challenging things, particularly as you sort of said, this race is referred by some people to be the toughest race in the world. Does that sort of headspace feed into you during that? Like, did you have any thoughts of like, I shouldn't have come back, or what am I doing here? Or was your heart still sort of in it? But
you know what it was? I think too, probably a part of my brain was like, I'm never going to have the same race. I'm a year older. Like it's almost impossible to have 2 dream races there. And early on, like even during the race, like my splits were off. Like I probably went in going, I want to try and hit the same splits as last year. And probably early on, they were slightly over. And then I think you start mentally going, oh, here we go. Like, it's not going to be the same race. And then I had really, really bad blisters. And at one point, I stopped to take my shoes off because I said to my crew, I'm like my feet are killing me. And then one of my friends who came, he's actually a nurse, and he looked at my feet and he was like, oh my God. He goes, I don't know what to do, because literally the bottoms of my feet were covered in blisters. And we sat there and I was like, I'm not even going to be able to finish this. I thought, like, what am I going to do? And then I remember I got out and they popped my blisters, taped my feet up, and I could barely walk. My feet were so sore. And then one of my crew came out and said to me, don't worry about it. We've got 30 hours. Like, you can walk to the finish. And I was thinking, oh my God, I'm not walking. And then once again, something just flipped in my brain. And I think, I went from maybe like 10th female and I ended up finishing 3rd. And once again, it was like something just switched in my head. And I thought, you know what, like, this is probably the last time I'm going to come here. So just, run hard and, but I just think it's really hard to go back into. When you've had such an amazing race, it's hard to go back in, because I didn't think I'd ever do better than what I did.
And talk to me about achieving so much in your 40s, because I absolutely love this. I feel like, so many people sort of even get into their 30s these days and they just sort of feel like they're over the fence and, they can't achieve great things. And particularly when it comes to physical, like activities and things like that. What was it like being in your 40s and achieving such greatness? Like, do people come up to you sort of wanting to know more? Because I feel like it's such a curious space, ultra, like endurance running, that, some of the highest achievers in this space are in their 40s. And I think there's something really special about that.
I think too, like maybe for women, I suppose like for me in my 30s, like I find now I've got so much more time on my hands, so I can put in the time to train, and, my son's so much more independent and I don't need to spend that time driving him around, picking him up, doing drop-offs. And so, and I think as well, whether women, I suppose they focus more on their family and kids. So they probably don't always, or they find they probably can't put 100% into it, sort of late 20s, 30s. And I think as well, like a lot of women I know, and even men in general, they start doing marathons. So they sort of progress from a marathon or half marathon. And I think just over the years, as you get older, you realise that probably ultra's a little bit more kinder on your body. It's a little bit more relaxed with the run walking. And I think too, you've just got sort of that bit more time to maybe focus more on yourself and not feel guilty. And I think for the people that haven't started, like, some people who are competitive in their sort of teens and 20s, it's like eventually I think your body just does get tired and gets worn out from it.
So in that I'm aware, in 2016, you got the Australian record at the 48-hour track championships.
Yes.
You ran 343 kilometers, which, we were speaking before I press record here. You know that you're running far when people that are in the space of ultra running think that you've ran far. That's when you really know that you've run a far distance. And I'm certainly in absolute awe of that. Can you share a little bit more of that? Because I went and watched a girlfriend this year at the first track race that I've actually been to. And it is a very different environment to your trail running.
Yeah.
I'd love to know sort of more about your strategy in going into a track run and your mindset, and if that sort of differs from something like Badwater as well.
Yeah, it's interesting because I think any person who runs to do, whether it's a 12-hour, 24, 48 track race, because I think it is a totally different experience, but it's actually a really fun experience. And I know as much as people go, oh, it must be so boring running around a track. However, when you're in that track, there's so much going on because there's constantly people the whole time. Whereas, you can go out and I've done trail races and I've ran on my own for 12 hours. Whereas on that track, you don't have to carry anything. You've got your nutrition, your food, your crew, music. Like there's just so much energy and so much going on. And for me, I've done probably 8 or 10 24-hour races. So it's interesting to go into a 48. It's probably didn't seem as daunting. But then when you drop back from a 48 to a 24, it's like, oh, my God, a 24 just becomes a sprint.
Wow.
So and I think when you're out there for 48 hours, you've got so much time. So, if you need to step off the track for half an hour and rest your legs or have something to eat, I think you learn with time that there's not that pressure. So if you need to have a bit of a break or, go and have a bit of a massage, all that actually helps towards the total at the end.
And in terms of like strategy, because I know in Badwater, I don't specifically remember the numbers, but it was sort of like you ran a certain amount of minutes, walked a certain amount of minutes, and just kind of kept that pattern.
Yeah.
And I even heard a podcast recently with you and Stephen Redfern, and he was even saying in sort of a track race, he'll sort of do something similar, like run a certain amount of laps and then walk half a lap. Did you have sort of a strategy in the 48 hour?
Yeah. So it's funny because a lot of races, like I really think you can't go out and just run 200 Ks without walking. So I really think it's good. And even a lot of my training runs, like every K, I might just put a 100-meter walk in. And I like to do that from the start. So when I went to the 48 hour, I was running 10 minutes, walking 5. So I try to do that like as long as I can. So that's what I start with. And then, it might become run 5, walk 5. And you actually get to the point, whereas I think towards the end I was running the straights and walking the bends. So for me, it was just keep moving, keep running. And even if that's just running the straights, walking the bends, you're still moving. And that's better than sitting on the sidelines. So I always start with a strategy and just try. And you've got to be able to change during the race. Like you'll shorten your run. And then as long as I think you're just moving, you're surprised how many Ks you can do.
And I know that you've shared sort of in a run like that, you feel like sort of compared to trail running that you can sort of like just be, like it feels like you're a lot more present in that space. And I know that I think like it's the Sri Chinmoy races or whatever, like it's all about like the meditation, the mindfulness. Do you sort of have any of those sorts of practice that you implement into your running?
Well, probably not so much, but I just find you can like trail race, you have to be switched on. You've got to watch where you're going. You can take a wrong turn. You can trip. Whereas I've found in those races, I can actually just totally zone out. And for hours and hours, I probably can't even tell you what I think about, but you just sort of go into a zone because you don't have to sort of concentrate. You don't have to be, watching your feet, making sure you're not taking a wrong turn. And, there was one year, there's a massive big clock. And I remember I was trying to, don't ask me why, I was trying to run every lap under 3 minutes. So I just kept watching the clock for hours. And then I was trying to do the maths in my head. And it just killed hours because obviously by the end, your brain's not that switched on. And I was trying to then figure out, okay, so I did that one in 2:40, so I've got 3:20. So it's like you just come up with these games in your mind that just distract you. And it just, the time goes so quickly when you're there.
And how do you deal with the level of exposure, because when I went to this track race, and I was there for about 12 hours watching my friend, she was doing the 24, and I watched a guy, he was a very good runner. I think he was in the 12 hours, and he started off quick, and I was like, all right, I'm really curious to see how this unfolds. As you're sharing, it's literally just a lap and then another lap. So you see these people throughout their long distance journey, which you normally don't see in a trail running. As you sort of shared, you've been in runs where you run on your own for 12 hours. So it was really confronting, actually, as someone just sitting there, to see like the deep ebb and flow of a person's journey in long distance. And this person, for example, just started off so strong for 3 or 4 hours, was just completely in that flow state. But by sort of the 10-hour, 11-hour mark, at like sort of 10 p.m., 11 p.m., like he was hobbling, he was crying, like you could see he was in a lot of pain. And it was so fascinating from a human perspective to be in the audience watching people go through what normally is quite hidden in the ultramarathon space in trail running. Do you sort of have like a strategy to kind of deal with that exposure, or do you just sort of like let whatever happens?
When you're on the track, there's such a camaraderie, and when you're there, like the 48-hour, you've got a 3-hour race, 6-hour, a 12-hour, a marathon, a 24. So there's constantly people, and a lot of those people are your friends. And I go, for me, it's actually a race where everyone's just looking out for one another. Everyone's supporting, encouraging. It's not like people's like out there like with that I'm here to win, and it's people, you know, you run past people and they'll go, you're doing great, you're looking strong. And I actually try to say that to nearly every person I pass, or if there's someone sitting on the side, I'll wave. And you know, and that's where I go. So even some of the people I've seen, and I remember, I think it was the 48 in 2016, one of the guys from work came and he was in shock, and there was towards the end of the race, and he was helping me like with massage, and then because everyone knew, you know, that I work for a physio, there were physios there, so everyone was coming up and, you know, can you give me a massage, can you help with this? And it was about 2 a.m. on the Sunday morning, and one of the guys, like, he could barely walk, and Matt had said to him, you got to stop. Like, he goes, it's not worth continuing on. And he goes, no, I've just got to go. And because it was so cold, he literally wrapped himself up in a big doona, and he's like hobbling around the track. And Matt's going to be, why? Like, he goes, he's injured. And I said, because it's that, you know, it's push, like you say, it's push like as much as you can. And, you know, and I think there is something inside of us that it's like, and even I've said myself, like, I'd have to be probably carted off in an ambulance before I'd stop, because I figure I can still keep walking, and that might be a really slow walk, but that's like finishing that race, you know. And I know I've had friends and family come, and I think they're speechless by what they see, because it's like you have to see it to believe what goes on.
Yeah, I find it such a fascinating area of endurance. And you know, even the Blue Mountains run I did, you know, I walked past this guy, and it was late sort of in the night, and he had told me that he felt like he'd almost sprained both his ankles. And I mean, even I was thinking, you know, why? But he's like, no, I want to make it. And I always find that question so fascinating about, like, where is the line between, you know, pushing yourself and truly trying to find where your potential is that day and trying to expand it, because obviously this is so much of why we do these things, is to understand what we're capable of. But then I feel like there's a line where it's like, but there's also an intelligence of knowing when to stop and to come back again and try again.
Yeah, it's so hard, because, like I go, I've seen people the same, and I just think, like, you're crazy. Like, there's always next year, and you know, maybe some people think they don't have next year, or they're in the best shape of their life, or, you know, if they don't accomplish this now. And you know, I think a lot of people, you know, like, put a lot of pressure on themselves. And you know, and that's probably for me, like, the way I go into a race is very low key. I try not to put pressure on myself. I don't like go out big noting myself that I'm going to do this or this, because I go, that just adds another layer of an expectation. Whereas I think if you go in things happen. I think pretty much all of us have had DNFs, and, I've had a couple of races that, I've learnt from them, and I've actually come back better the next year.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we are all human, and you have to, listen to your body, because it's not worth, I think, pushing to that point and even doing a permanent injury or permanent damage.
Mm-hmm. And where is your line for that? Like, do you have a clear marker on how to make a decision in a race when you decide that, now is the time that I should DNF?
I've only actually DNF'd one race, which is one of my very, very first races back in, I think it was 2011 or 12, where I actually took a wrong, it was my first miler, and I just took a wrong turn and ended up 20K off course. And I think looking back then, I didn't have the experience to, I was just so irrational. I was like, oh my God, I've done 20Ks off course. This is going to be 180, not 160. Whereas looking back now, I go, once again, you'd go, okay, I've gone off 20Ks off course. I've still got plenty of time to finish this. But that to me was just lack of experience.
Mm-hmm.
I did have one race in Taipei when I ended up on a drip because I'd lost so much weight. But that was basically I didn't really have a choice, because I ended up collapsing due to the heat and how much fluid I'd lost. But for me, if I get to that point, I would probably just keep walking. And I always think if I get to that point, if something's obviously structurally broken, I probably would stop. But I always just think, I can, walk to the finish. That's my thing. I would always, I'll walk it out and get to the finish. And probably for the same reason that I go, if I just want to finish it, and regardless of time, just to get there.
Right. So you currently run around sort of 180 to 200 kilometers a week that I'm aware of, which is just ginormous. Are you a big believer? Because, obviously in the running space, there's some people that are big believers of running sort of long kilometers, and that's sort of how you get a better runner. And then there are people sort of the mix of strength and conditioning and running. Where's sort of your headspace in terms of what makes you the best runner that you can be?
I think there's no set training program. Everyone has to do what suits them. And obviously it's around family, lifestyle, work, and some bodies just can't handle big Ks. I have a lot of the guys who I've ran in the Australian team with, they'll do 100, 120 Ks, and they go, once they start going over that, they just break down. So I think you've got to know your body, you sort of got to know your limits. And for me, I've always done big Ks, and I think, touch wood, I've very rarely been injured. And even, I do strength train twice a week. Luckily, I work at an allied health clinic, so I, have regular massages. I've got those people, like a team around me, I suppose, which is lucky that I can, if I start to feel a niggle, I can run something by them and go, what do you think? And they'll say to me, take 2 or 3 days off, get on the bike, do some cross training. And I think if you catch most little niggles early enough, you can usually 2 or 3 days and you're sort of back on track. But I think you have to know what works for you. And I would say, because I do big Ks, that's why I've performed well, because I know people who've done probably almost half that I do who've got as good results. So it's doing, I think, what suits you and what you can fit into your lifestyle.
Right. So next year you've got planned the Delirious W.E.S.T 200-mile race. So, obviously someone that's so experienced, this is a big race. Do you still ever get an element of fear or excitement when doing these races? How does someone that is so experienced, how do you sort of feel in the lead up to such a big race next year?
Probably a race like that. It is a mix of excitement and fear, but it's probably more fear. I go, it's, going, because WA, I go, you don't know the course. I've heard there's big spiders at night and there's lots of snakes. And so I sort of think about that, and I go, and that's where I go, around a track, you're safe. I can run 300 Ks around a track and I'm safe because I've got my crew there. And so I go, going for a race like that, where you're out in the bush on your own, it scares me a little bit. So I'm hoping I can find someone to run with. And once again, I go, to me, it's just start and get to the finish. So no real pressure on time, but really trying to enjoy the experience, because I was meant to go last year, and because of COVID couldn't get there. And then this year. So I go, it's just for me, just really enjoy the experience and get there. And I'm hoping one of my friends, John, who's in the Australian team, he's planning on doing it too. So we'd sort of spoken about just running together, and more, I think, like from a safety and I think it's always a lot more fun too, just having someone to run with. Yeah, it should be good though.
And someone with like so much experience like you, do you ever feel like you need to keep pushing the bar in terms of the length of race that you do as well?
I really enjoy the long races now, and like even the 48 hour, I just enjoy the whole aspect, the community, the track, and I can't see myself, like, probably Delirious will be the furthest race I do. Like, I'm not someone who goes, I want to go and do now 500 Ks. I go, that doesn't really appeal to me. I'd like to keep, even just doing some different events and, just try some new races. And it's been hard, obviously, the last 2 years with COVID, that we haven't been able to do much. And I've got all these races rolled over next year. So, yeah. The other one too is, the last man standing, the backyard races. I'm really keen to do one of them. That's one thing I really want to do.
Wow, so you haven't attempted that yet? That seems right down your alley.
Yeah,
wow.
So the same. I was meant to do it this year and last year when up in Queensland, but because of COVID. So hopefully next year, that is probably one race I'm really keen to do.
And sort of as you share, as people start moving back into the space of going back into events, because a lot of us have kind of had quite a rest. What is like a mindset advice that you would give for some of us sort of getting back into running? What is one of the strongest mindsets that you use that sort of helps you to achieve what you've achieved?
I really, for me, my running is, I do it because I love it. And even sometimes it's not so much the racing that motivates me. I love the training. I love the friends I've made. I love getting out with my girlfriends and running. And I think too, it's just enjoying what you do. And it's, like whether it's pushing yourself as hard as you can or just going out there to participate, to be part of an event, I think both of those things gives you like a lot of energy and that feel good. So it's not always, I think, about, winning or being front of the field, but I think just participating and just enjoying being out there.
I absolutely love that. And, I love to continue to hear this because, throughout this podcast, I've obviously had conversations with different high performers, and it's so fascinating to hear that, I think every single one of them that I've asked in terms of their headspace has always come back to sort of that enjoyment and that passion and being in the moment and having fun with it. I think most people sort of make the assumption that it's all about sort of that, grit between the teeth and get it done headspace. But I find sort of particularly the people that stay consistent within this space are the ones that have such a positive affiliation with it. So it's so wonderful to hear. And thank you so much, Nikki, for this beautiful conversation. It's just been amazing to hear your story and hear your headspace between all the achievements that you've achieved.
Thank you so much for having me. Thank you. It's been great.
So I'd love to ask you on a final note, Nikki, what does it mean to you to be human?
For me to be human, I just like being a positive, happy, energetic person. And, I like to give to everyone, and I accept everyone for who they are and embrace everyone for who they are. And that's why I think the ultra running community is such an amazing community, because you can just be you when you're not judged and no one's better than anyone else. And you can be the most elite runner, but you're still running with the back of the packers and sharing that space with them. And I think that's why it's such an amazing sport.